Hi everyone, welcome back to Ilum Sabers. Today's video is one that I'm really excited about. I've actually been planning this out for a while, so I would like to get right into it. This video is going to be a comparison between the Anakin Starkiller and TXQ Book of Boba Fett and the Anakin Starkiller Rescuer. So these two hilts are both designed by Anakin Starkiller, but one is produced by TXQ and one was produced by Starkiller on an individual run. And I acquired the Rescuer some time ago and got it all painted up. And so since I have finished that, I want to do a video where I compare the Rescuer and the Book of Boba Fett hilt. I did a bit of a comparison with photos when the Rescuer was new, like when I just got it and it was unpainted. But it was a lot harder to kind of discern some of the differences because when the whole hilt is that bare aluminum silver, some of the details aren't as striking or don't stand out quite in the same way. So now that it's painted, I wanted to kind of get both of them together side by side in front of the camera and just kind of go point for point, checking out the hilts next to each other. One thing I want to note is that the Anakin Starkiller does, the Rescuer does have this additional piece, which is the FX emitter and grenade section, which is for if you are having it installed. This is to replicate the behind-the-scenes FX hilt that we see on the Mandalorian gallery. And the Book of Boba Fett hilt does not have that, so it's, you know, kind of always in that belt hanger mode. But it does come with this, which is very similar to the emitter for the FX upper. So I'll go ahead and kind of show those as well, but once again, it's not going to be the exact same. TXQ did not make their Book of Boba Fett hilt with the idea of having that second upper half in mind, so it's always kind of in that belt hanger mode. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and switch to the desk cam and get kind of a better view of these hilts side by side, and then we can go ahead and look at some of the similarities and differences. Alright, so I've got the desk cam set up, and we've got both hilts in front of it here. The first thing that you'll probably notice is that one of them is weathered, and one of them is nice and clean and shiny. The clean one is, for reference, the Anakin Starkiller Rescuer, and the weathered one is the Anakin Starkiller TXQ Book of Boba Fett. So this nice light weathering here is my preferred way that this hilt came. And I do think that the Rescuer looks better clean. This is really how we see it in the scenes that we do see it, whereas the Book of Boba Fett actually does look like it has some weathering on it in some of the screenshots that we can see. So I also think it kind of makes some sense because we do know that chronologically the Book of Boba Fett Luke scene takes place later. Let's work from the bottom up on this because the next obvious difference is going to be the tri-ring. So if you'll notice, the tri-ring here is oriented to where it is at the 12 o'clock position if the control box is at 9 o'clock, or if the control box is at 12 o'clock like this, then the tri-ring is at 3 o'clock. So it's perpendicular to it and facing out away from the buttons, so to speak. Whereas on the Rescuer, you've got a bit of a different orientation. It's actually almost the opposite exactly, although not quite. So on this side, you've got it, but it's not quite perpendicular to the box here. It's like 90 degrees plus maybe like another 30 or another 45. Something like that. So it's really not the same. Both of these are nice and well fitted and tight in there, posable. but they are very different in their orientation. The rings themselves are quite similar in size and material. You can see here. See if I can kind of line them up for the camera a little bit better. Have to move some things around a little bit. We'll get back to the FX in a moment, but there we go. Okay, so with these side by side, you can see that the Book of Boba Fett one is actually a little smaller. Don't know if that is super easy to tell, but it is just a little smaller. They're very, very similar. The thickness is probably, it's about the same, but I think that this one is a little thicker. This one is also a little smaller as far as diameter across. This one's a little larger across, but is a little thinner as well. Other than that, no big differences to note. They're roughly the same shape, and we don't have any references that suggest that it's kind of an abnormal shape, like the Cave Scene Hero tri-ring, which is an abnormal triangular shape. It's not actually a triangle, it's like a curved kind of thing. But both of these are triangles. Moving up a little bit more, I'll kind of move these back into a more similar position relative to each other, if I can manage that. Moving up, you've got the booster section, which looks largely the same to me. Not quite. It actually kind of almost looks like this section here is a little bit thinner. Looks like this section here is a little bit thinner on the Rescuer. So it almost looks like the pommel on the Rescuer is actually a bit smaller overall. Like the distance from here to here is a smaller outer diameter than the distance from here to here. And I think that what that results in is a larger relief between the outer edge of the booster and then the outer edge or the bottom edge of the pommel here. So there's more, in other words, there's more of a drop off from here to here than from here to here. So dimensionally, there's a difference there. The boosters do, however, look to be about the same length, if not exactly the same. The clamp sections also look to be about exactly the same length. However, you might have noticed this earlier, the control boxes are different. So let's spend kind of a minute on the control box. The Rescuer, when it came out, was well known for its very large control box. And the control box on this is much bigger than the control box on the regular Hero, which is already a large control box. But you'll notice the Book of Boba Fett also has a control box that's pretty big, but still smaller than the Rescuer. You'll also notice that the color of the rails is different. So this is a Rust-Oleum Pure Gold, which is what Haloax recommends painting that with. Whereas this is a darker, more weathered color. And I believe that that was done in order to match the weathering on the rest of the hilt. However, on subsequent releases, when they've released this hilt as a clean aluminum finish with, you know, the silver is not, the aluminum's not weathered, the brass neck's not weathered, the control box still has this darker paint here. So whatever they went with for that, they stuck with it, even though I really believe that that is not accurate and that it's only accurate if you're going for the more weathered look, whereas, which I do think that hilt was weathered to some degree. But if you're going for a clean look, I don't think that the darker rails look very good. But for this hilt, like the one that I have, my particular one, the control box rails match the weathering on the brass neck. So I think it looks really good. But just a note on that, if you're going to get a new one, and you're trying to get it clean, don't be surprised when this control box rail is painted that darker color. Something else you'll notice besides just the box size are some details about the box that are different. So the rail size is different. The length from the top to the bottom of the upper rail is larger than on the Book of Boba Fett, but the lower rail is overall much smaller than the lower rail on the Book of Boba Fett. So the upper is larger, the lower is smaller when compared to the Book of Boba Fett. The arrows are differently shaped, right? These are more narrower arrows. They look like you put them in like Microsoft Paint or something, and like or like copy pasted an image into Microsoft Word and like squeezed it, stretched it out long ways. These are still not, I mean, these are still a little bit stretched compared to the normal arrows, but they are not as stretched out as these are. You'll also notice there are bigger screws here, and that's also accurate. The big screws on the Rescue are very accurate. I don't think we actually have any photos of this side of the control box for the Book of Boba Fett, so kind of anything goes. They kind of, I believe, took the Rescuer as a reference. You'll notice also that there's a line here which kind of is mimicking the arrow plate that is on the Return of the Jedi hero. There's a separate arrow plate. And so that line there just kind of evokes that idea, whereas there's no line here. So it's all smooth all the way across. The next thing is that the buttons are different. On the Rescuer, the buttons are, I guess I should say both of these have smaller buttons than a regular Return of the Jedi hero. Normally those buttons are going all the way across to where the plate starts. Not all the way across, but they're much longer and thinner. These buttons are stockier, so they're wider this way, but shorter this way. Something else that I noticed when looking at some reference photos are that the buttons on the Rescuer, I believe, are actually not as accurate as what they could be, and I believe that that was actually rectified with the Book of Boba Fett. If you look at some of the reference photos, you can actually see a little silver gap right here. When the hilt is hanging on Luke's belt in The Mandalorian, there's a silver gap between the edge of the button and the edge of the control box. So I believe that this button here actually should be more like this one, if we're going to be accurate to The Mandalorian. As far as Book of Boba Fett, like I said, we never actually see this side of the control box in the show. So kind of anything goes. It's up to interpretation unless the actual prop becomes available. Moving upward to the grip section, these basically look the same. This one was painted with Rust-Oleum Satin Canyon Black, and this one was painted with whatever the TXQ factory painted it with. But other than the color, which is a little bit different, right? This is a matte, and this is more of a satin. They're largely the same. There aren't really any dimensional differences that I see here. Something I want to point out is that this bottom black section is much thicker on these Mandalorian era hilts than on any of the Return of the Jedi heroes. So the Return of the Jedi hero, it's maybe like half this size. And it actually looks to me like maybe the Book of Boba Fett has a little bit of a thicker section right here than this one. They're both really, really similar. They're both thicker than the actual Return of the Jedi prop. But I think this one actually might be a little bit wider from the edge of the clamp section to where the first divot begins. So from here to here, I think this one's a little smaller. This one's a little bigger. And I think, yeah, because they're lined up pretty much exactly. And the first ring starts a little bit above the first ring on this one. And then you can kind of see that continued on up because the silver on the wind vane is above the silver on the wind vane here. Something else to note is that the silver on the wind vane here, that ring, is thicker than the ring on the Book of Boba Fett. Moving up a little further, the necks, the upper necks are roughly the same size and proportion. Of course, there's a difference in material. The Book of Boba Fett uses a actual brass neck that's in this case been chemically weathered, whereas the Rescuer is an aluminum neck, like the whole hilt, which is aluminum, and that was painted with the Rust-Oleum Champagne Bronze that Haloax recommends using in his video. Moving up a little further, you can see that there are some differences in the emitter. Try to line them up as best as I can. So starting here, the bottom edge of the emitter, this is thicker on the Rescuer than it is on the Book of Boba Fett. See if I can kind of center these a little bit better. But essentially, this bottom ridge, right up from the neck, this silver part here, is thicker on the Rescuer than on the Book of Boba Fett. And I think that you can pretty clearly see that on the camera. Moving up a little further, the main emitter cup right here is thicker, or wider, or longer, however you want to say it, on the Rescuer than it is on this Book of Boba Fett. This almost looks like the Creepy Uncle as far as the length of the emitter cup, but not quite. The Creepy Uncle is still the deepest emitter cup of any Luke that I've seen, but this is definitely closer to that in what it makes me think of than this one, which looks more like a classic Return of the Jedi, very shallow. Next, you can see that the neck section up here, kind of the upper emitter, looks to be thicker on the Book of Boba Fett than the Rescuer. So kind of the Book of Boba Fett kind of makes up some of that space that it loses in the lower emitter, because both of these hilts are basically the exact same length, and so there are a few differences here and there that they each kind of make up for the length in one way or other, because they end up being the same. But yeah, so this section here is thicker on the Book of Boba Fett than on the Rescuer. Then the Rescuer has a thicker upper lip than the Book of Boba Fett. And finally, the emitter nub, or dimple on the top there, looks to be about the same as far as dimensions go. It looks like the Book of Boba Fett is actually a little bit longer and maybe a little bit wider as well than the Rescuer when it comes to the emitter top there. So from top to bottom, we can kind of see that there are a few small dimensional differences, but overall, I'm going to line them up one more time, and you will see that they are almost identical in overall length from pommel to emitter. Yeah, so you can see that they are pretty much the exact same in overall length. Let me see, make sure I've got them. Yeah. So overall, those are really, really similar. I'm going to go ahead and switch the Rescuer and the Book of Boba Fett over to their FX versions, the versions that are, the Rescuer was meant to replicate the FX that we see in the Mando Gallery, and then the FX emitter for the Book of Boba Fett that lets you use a blade, and we can compare those as well. All right, so now we've got both of the hilts in their FX configuration. Again, the bottom one is from the Book of Boba Fett, and the top one is from the Mandalorian, Anakin Starkiller's Rescuer, and the Anakin Starkiller TXQ Book of Boba Fett. You'll notice that when they're together, they're still, when they're both together in their FX configurations, they're still remarkably similar. For the Book of Boba Fett, nothing has changed from the top of the emitter cup right here all the way down. And for the Rescuer, nothing has changed from the top of the clamp section all the way down. So this section completely screws on and off, and then this section up here screws on and off. So you'll notice the first thing probably that comes to mind is that the rings on this hilt are incredibly thick, and those are based on the hilt that we see the stunt actor using in the Mandalorian gallery for the Mandalorian Season 2. That's what this entire upper section is based on. And to my knowledge, there's not a whole lot of photos of this bottom section out there, so we don't really know what it looks like, other than EFX made a replica of the stunt hilt, and it does look remarkably identical to the Rescuer. The control box, all of it. So I was surprised by that, because I was surprised that a stunt hilt would have the control box, but that's what they made, and it seems like from all accounts that the stunt hilt does have a control box, so that's interesting. Of course, the Return of the Jedi hilts also all had control boxes because of the Graflex clamps, so I just assumed that nowadays they would make them a little bit more ergonomic for the actors to use, but it doesn't seem like that's what they did, which is cool, because it's always nice when the hilts that they're using for stunts are similar to the actual hero hilts. The emitters are also very similar, right? So this entire emitter is new, from the other section that we had on there, whereas just this upper part is what is different about the Book of Boba Fett. But both of them are remarkably similar. You've got this upper reaching part here, and I'm assuming that they're designed similar on purpose. I'm not sure how similar the props were. I'm not sure how similar the props between Mando and Book of Boba Fett were, but I do remember Anakin Starkiller saying that there was a quick screen grab where you can actually see this upper emitter portion in the Book of Boba Fett right as Luke turns on his saber. So someone had seen that, and so that was, of course, added then to this. Working our way down from the emitter, of course, because while they're similar, they're still very different. The emitter cup on this is thicker. The bottom of the emitter here is still thicker than the one in the Book of Boba Fett. The necks are still different in material and color. This wind vane ring is still larger than this wind vane ring. And then, of course, all of these rings are much thicker than these rings. And both of them are even rings, but these are thick even rings and these are thin even rings. Moving down, of course, this is all the same. We've covered all of this. So I just thought that it would be interesting to look at the stunt versions of these hilts side by side. Now, I'm not sure that this is really supposed to be an accurate representation of the Book of Boba Fett stunt hilt. I've never heard that claim made. I think it's really more supposed to be the belt hanger that we see. And we never really get a good view of the stunt hilt anyway, because in the Mando behind the scenes, we got to see the Rescuer stunt, but we never really got the same kind of behind the scenes look at the stunt hilt for Luke's lightsaber in the Book of Boba Fett. So I believe this is really supposed to be just the belt hanger, but with this on it, you can have kind of an approximation of the stunt hilt. So side by side, they're still very different from, the grip up. The Book of Boba Fett certainly has a lot more in common with the with the belt hanging grip that is in the Mandalorian than the stunt grip that's in the Mandalorian behind the scenes gallery. So with that out of the way, I just will bring this back in and kind of show some of that. So you can see there's a lot more in common here between the belt hangers than between the stunt and the belt hanger, although these emitters are kind of both stunt emitters. The TXQ does come with, of course, the stunt emitter, and it also does come with a belt hanging emitter. So you have both of those options, but like I said, I think the hilt is primarily designed after the belt hanger. So there are a lot of differences between these hilts, especially when you're looking at the FX configuration, but even in the belt hanger configuration, there are a lot of differences, especially from the clamp section down, right? So the control box is very different. The tri-ring orientation is very different. The pommels are different. The pommel is thinner on the Rescuer. And one other thing that I am realizing I didn't go over is that the clamp cards are different. So the clamp card on the Book of Boba Fett has these black lines that we're kind of familiar with in Hero clamp cards, whereas the Rescuer has an all gold card. And there seem to be some conflicting opinions on whether the raw brass look is accurate or whether these get painted. I have yet to see a reference photo that shows them clearly either way. But my understanding is that most people are leaving it with that clear brass, and so that's probably what's more accurate. You can also kind of see the one for the Book of Boba Fett is a painted gold color, whereas the Rescuer is actual raw brass. I would not be surprised if the Book of Boba Fett card is like actually maybe an aged brass, maybe not painted like I was saying, but maybe like aged, or if it is painted, then it's brass underneath, because it is very heavy when you take it out of there. It's very thick, very heavy. So I wouldn't be surprised if it is brass as well. But overall, these hilts are really, really cool. The Mandalorian version is, or the Mandalorian belt hanging version is pretty similar to the Book of Boba Fett belt hanging version, but there are a lot of differences between the stunt version, as you would expect. So hopefully this video kind of gave you some insight into that, gave you some ideas on where the dimensions are different and what makes these hilts different enough that they're warranted being two versions made. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back to the regular camera and do the outro. All right, thanks everybody for tuning into today's video. I hope that this really was informational and you got a lot of new info out of it, or maybe just a refresher on some stuff you already knew. These hilts are both really cool. I had a blast working on the Rescuer. I actually did do the painting on it myself, and so that was a very fun process, and I learned a lot during that about some of the best methods to use for this particular hilt. Again, if you enjoyed the video, please do all of the things that YouTube likes, the like and comment and share. Please subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the kind of content that I am making, and I'll make sure to keep putting out more. Until the next time, may the Force be with you, and thanks for checking out the video.